And of course I got cut off, so let's pick back up here. So we're trying to simplify the square root of 12 now. So think of the largest perfect square that goes into 12, which would be 4, right? Because if you break this down, that could be the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, or 4 times 3. We technically should put the square roots on both of them. Now we can take the square root of 4, which is just 2. Square root of 3 would just stay as square root 3, and that would be fully simplified. And of course, if you wanted to check your answer in your calculator, put in square root 2 times square root 6, press enter, and then type in 2 times the square root of 3 and press enter, and those two numbers should be exactly the same. All right, let's look at another example. We've got more multiplication here with radicals. So let's look at each one individually and see if we can simplify it first. So let's look at 3 square root 8. I know I can simplify the square root of 8. Think of the largest perfect square that goes into it, which would be 4, right? This would be 4 times 2. So the square root of 4 I can evaluate that, that's 2, and this would be left as square root 2. Now don't forget, we have 3 that we've got to multiply also. So this would equal 6 root 2. Okay, so that takes care of this one. Over here, there's no perfect squares that go into 6, so we're just going to bring that down. All right, let's go ahead and multiply these. So in multiplying radicals, we multiply the outside numbers first. So 6 times 2 is 12. And then we've got 2 times 6, which is also 12. Now, don't be so quick to circle your answer. You always have to check and see if it can be simplified further, which I can actually simplify the square root of 12. So the largest perfect square that goes into 12 is 4. We did this one already, right? That'd be 4 times 3. The square root of 4 is 2, so I'm going to pull that out. Square root of 3, I cannot do. I would leave that. And then, of course, we have our 12. Don't forget about that. So this would equal 24 root 3. Final answer. All right. Got another one here. I think I've got like 10 of them. Okay, let's try another one. Of course, you guys can pause this and try to evaluate it yourself and then skip ahead and see if you got the answer right. All right, square root 6 times square root 6. Can't simplify each one individually, so let's go ahead and multiply them together. So root 6 times root 6 would give me the square root of 36. Now, if you recognize this, that is a perfect square, right? If you have like your factors written out to the side, you've got like 5 squared equals 25, 6 squared equals 36. So this one is a perfect square in itself. So we can just evaluate that. Square root of 36 is just the number 6. So you'll actually notice a little trick in problems like this. If you have the square root of a number times the square root of that exact same number, the square roots will always cancel out and you'll just be left with this number, right? So like if I had square root 7 times square root 7, I know that that's just 7, right? You can evaluate it and be like, okay, well that would be the square root of 49, but then the square root of 49 is just 7. So you can do that with anything, right? Like square root 102 times the square root of 102 is just going to equal 102. So it'll save you some work if you remember that. All right, we've got some division now. Anytime you have the square root of a fraction, you can break that apart like this. You can take the square root of the numerator all over the square root of the denominator. Okay. Conversely, if you were given this, you can change it into this problem, like the square root of the whole fraction. All right, now sometimes, like I know 20 over 100 reduces to 1 over 5, so you can reduce the fraction first, or you can leave it like this and reduce each one individually. It just depends on the problem. Like in this case, I wouldn't reduce it to 1 over 5 because I noticed that 100 is actually a perfect square, so this might be a little bit easier. So anyway, you either want to reduce in the beginning or reduce in the end, and it really just depends on the problem you're given, and you'll get better the more you do. All right, so let's go ahead and simplify each one of these. So simplify the square root of 20. If you need to write that off to the side somewhere to break it down, go for it. Square root of 20. Think about the largest perfect square that goes into 20. Well, that would be 4, right? 4 times 5. If you take the square root of these, the square root of 4 is 2. And then square root of 5 would be left in the radical, or the 5 would be left in the radical. Okay, so that's what root 20 would simplify to. Square root of 100, I know that is a perfect square, so that simplifies to just the number 10. Now, always simplify. I even wrote that here. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Don't circle your answer until you've simplified it fully. So if you have numbers that are not in the radical, like 2 and 10, those are just normal numbers. They're not inside of a square root. See if you can simplify them. 2 over 10 as a fraction does simplify to 1 over 5. Okay, so you could write this as 1, square root of 5 stays the same, over 5. Now you don't need the 1, that's just 1 times square root of 5. So I would just leave this as root 5 over 5. Final answer. All right, let's try another one. So we've got another square root of a fraction. So again, you can pull this apart, make this square root 8 over square root 18, and then you can simplify each one individually. In this case, let's actually simplify this fraction first, because I think this is going to be a little bit easier. All right, so 8 over 18, go ahead and reduce that. You know you can divide both of those numbers by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So we've got 4 over 9. This is going to be really easy, actually. Now let's go ahead and pull this apart. So that could be the square root of 4 over the square root of 9. And look at that. You've got 2 perfect squares here. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 9 is 3. That was pretty easy. Just reduce this to 2/3.